Hey everyone, I'm delighted to be joined by Alison Armstrong. Alison is a multi-instrumentalist and a music educator currently working in Uzbekistan. Alison, what in your experience is the general attitude in Uzbekistan toward pursuing formal music education?
Okay, so where Uzbekistan is located is underneath Kazakhstan, and of course, Kazakhstan is underneath Russia, and they've had a long connection with Russia. So in Uzbekistan, you have the Russian tradition of teaching solfege, and there is what you call a music school where students can go after school to study this method. I've had a number of my students in the high school who say to me, "Oh, I've finished music school." I'm like, "What does that mean?" And they will say, "It means I have been studying at this place for around 8 years. I've done some piano, some theory, some learning solfege, sometimes singing in a choir." But at the other end of things as well, there is a long folk tradition that exists in Central Asia. And so I also have a number of students who play dutar or dombra with their mother and sing the traditional folk songs. Uzbekistan has also an interesting connection to Korea. There were some Koreans who were fleeing the Korean War, and Russia took them on and sent them to Uzbekistan. And so we have the Korean traditional music that exists here as well. And we also have close cultural connections to Turkey. And so you will have the Turkish pop music and even Arabic pop music that will be heard around Uzbekistan. But yeah, so here there is formal study. You can study it at university level, and the roots tend to be sort of Russian tradition of classical music. There is a folk music thread, and I'm not sure about contemporary music here. We also have a jazz festival that takes place every April here in Tashkent, which is very, very popular, and I think most of it is for free, actually.
That's cool.
Yeah.
How do you find families at your school feel about music as a profession if their children want to pursue music beyond primary schooling?
So Uzbekistan has a very young population. The majority of the population are in their 30s. And so music as a profession, people are trying to kind of establish their middle classness and trying to get good stable jobs and provide for their families. And music is not seen as something that should be pursued as a formal career, but it is definitely an everyday part of life. And they definitely encourage their children to take piano lessons and singing lessons and join up for all of the pop idol type TV shows that exist in this part of the world. So we've got lots of kids who sing. Even just down the road from me, there's an arena called Humo Arena, and there are a couple of well-known pop singers like Sevara Nazarkhan who will fill an arena with people. Or there's a bit of a this guy who's a comic older singer. He's a bit of a laughing stock of the country, but they also love him at the same time. He also will fill an arena with people singing his songs in Uzbek. So yeah.
You mentioned that Uzbekistan has a lot of different influences, from Korean influences to Turkish influence to Russian influence. How does that inform your curriculum, what you decide to teach in schools?
So my school, I'm at Tashkent International School, and it's a full IB World School, which means that we ascribe to the IB MYP Middle Years Program and IB Diploma Program. And I teach the IB Diploma Program and Middle Years Program. And in the Diploma Program, there is a push to encourage students to learn about themselves and the world around them through looking at local music, global music, and personal music for a series of assignments where they explore and they experiment and they present as performers and as composers. And so often my music classes are quite small. There's usually 4 or 5 students. And when they come to me as their teacher, we will, learn songs as a class, but we will also, for our assignments, pursue interests in anything from hip-hop from Atlanta to K-pop from Seoul or to Makam. And so I've had students who've investigated a wide variety of music through the classroom and learnt to play them on their instruments or interpret them on their instruments. So I really like how the IB has set up the course to allow students to pursue it almost more like a visual arts student than, like a visual arts student will be allowed to just pursue any kind of art form that they're interested in. The music program is the same. So, yeah. You
mentioned that the Russian education is still considered the standard for formal music education. How does something like this program set them up for that? Like if they decide to then pursue music at the university level, do you think they're at a disadvantage that maybe they have a very broad primary education in music?
So the idea of the IB is to develop researchers, composers and presenters and performers. So many of the students who come to me, they have already been learning the piano for 8 years or the violin for 8 years or have been singing in choirs their whole life. So usually if they're studying IB music, they're also outside of school pursuing music in a one-to-one setting. Our school has a music academy where they can go, for a 30-minute lesson after school or 45-minute lesson on their chosen instrument. And some of our teachers even go to the students' homes and give private lessons on the weekend.
You've taught all over the world. If you had to point out certain characteristics that have made your experience teaching in Uzbekistan unique, what would you say those are? If you were to think of the students and the music.
I love how music forms a really important part of special events here. One of the first things I experienced when I arrived in Tashkent was I was looking for a house and with a real estate agent, and then suddenly down the street there was a parade of carne surne players playing these long trumpets and these reeded like oboe-like instruments, and the parade of these instrumentalists was for someone's wedding. And so, and to this day, you can find these carne surne players anywhere in Uzbekistan. And even for our graduation ceremony that we had at the school, we hired some to come and play for the students as they were leaving their final assembly. So I think the best thing about Uzbekistan is it celebrates its own local music. It wants to fuse with other musics through the jazz festival that it holds every April. It makes music part of daily life, and part of a healthy, balanced way of being as a human being. So that's stuck with me.
Beautiful. And finally, how has Uzbek society supported you as a music educator, and how does society support musicians, professional musicians, educators of music?
So I don't speak Russian. I don't speak Uzbek. I mean, a smattering here and there. But I've been able to find a gig where, if I want to play, my husband's a guitarist, and I'll sing. And so at our local pub down the road from the school, we can perform together as a duo. My husband has a rock band that he's formed of a bunch of different expats, and they'll perform down in our basement, but they'll also be invited to play places. So we have a United Nations Day festival that happens at the school every October. And the community really comes together and says, you be the stage manager. give us a stage, give us some sound equipment, and we'll get up and we'll perform. So hearing from the Korean community or from the Chinese community or the Russian community, like everyone gets up. And I think it's a great place to be a musician. But it's still a very informal economy of being a musician. Yes, you'll see musicians in the odd restaurant, or DJs in the local pizza bar, but it's still not a career here.
Sure.
Yeah.
Alison, this has been great. Thank you so much.